Hello, I'm back, and I had got that transmission was intercepted once again by the faulty device, and but I'm going to keep running with that last video to keep the train of thought. For anyone landing on this video, there's a previous video leading into this that will give the context of these statements. But what I was saying is that according to Jung, we are more, or according to Osho, we are more so of what we're not aware of about ourselves. And then with that, Jung would say that a male human is their liminal, their conscious mind is more so characterized by masculinity, but then the feminine, the subliminal or the subconscious mind and tendencies of a human male are more so feminine. And then on the contrast of that, a human female, their liminal or their conscious mind of what they present, or what may be appreciated about them, that they themselves appreciate about themselves, or that other people might encounter superficially, would be more so feminine. But then their actual deeper subconscious mind is more so masculine. I think that Jung would pointed that out, and that's actually been my experience a lot in life. Is that the fiercest the fiercest that you might see a human being, and the fiercest aspect you might see as a human being would actually rather be in a female than a male, if they are actually prompted to the point of outrage or righteous indignation or anger or passion. You would see the more awesome aspect in a female, and then maybe the more tenderness or the actual real femininity, you might actually see that more in a male. Like some of the tenderness around, like to be tender to the point of willing to die for something, you would see that in a male. Or even like some males, or what were males that embrace that really embrace deeper aspects of themselves to the point of leaning to starting to fashion a more feminine experience, to the point of even being transsexual, whether they had underwent an operation or not, just to actually to experience a transsexual male. That might be the most feminine that you'll see a human being, and also some of the most beauty that you'll see in a human being is both personally, but then also as they express themselves in different ways. That you might actually see that in what had been a male, and that actually is in that is in consonance with these ideas of Jung, saying that we are more so more of what we are is what is below the surface. And then for a male, that actually might be more so feminine, and for a female, that might be more so male. And then I've referenced Arthur Avalon a lot, and he talks about some of the ideas of that are from the region of India, like Bharata, I think it's called. And they put forward in some of his works that the most formidable aspect of this reality is it can be characterized as feminine, and then also even in like warlike activities or warring, the actual most fierce the most fierce leader, or the most fierce member of a warring faction or party would likely be the female, and then the males are actually their attendants, as he says. And that's the same in a family, that actually is the woman who is the real head of the household, if we're being honest, and the male is more so of the counterpart and attendant. The male might get to wear the pants or walk out the door first, as the kind of like as the stooge goes first, but the real rank and power is a little bit behind that, just like in a war or something. And the consequences with the female on many aspects of society, even all the way up to conflict and combat. Not that a female would be stronger in combat physically, but the initiative and the insight and the daring and cunning and the morale and the intent of war can be stronger in a female, from the Eastern perspective. But what I meant to say is that it's also similar, like in our human bodies, that our human body is recognized to exist as polarity on many different lines of thought and schools of thought, I think would confirm that. In that the author Arthur Avalon says that our body is dual. So we have two of most things, like two feet, two generative organ, to either so we are so we have two of most of the structures of our body, and then the structures of our body that are singular can be seen in two easily, most instances, according to Avalon. And I think that and then Osho, he talks about that we have two eyes. And if we didn't have two eyes, we would have like we wouldn't. I think they call that binocular, and we would have maybe a monocular experience of reality, and reality would appear very strange, and we would have a difficult time managing it, which may be a little bit of how it appears to that relative of mine who was blind in one eye, where the dynamics of depth perception and range and maybe more subtle properties of sight are facilitated by having two eyes. And then I think the brilliant musician and songwriter Brian Wilson, who was a little bit of a less prominent member of the original Beach Boys, but was responsible for a lot of their musical brilliance and insight in songwriting, who's a very interesting person if you can find any interviews with him. I once came across that he had been assaulted by a family member as a prank. I think they may have or he was either a level of abuse from a family member. I think that where his ear was damaged, one of his ears was damaged to where he could no longer experience sound in stereo, but yet he had certain gifts within that deprivation that allowed him to do things musically and harmonically based on that lack of the same perception that we have. I'm just pointing out how significant it is that we have two of each structure, and that what that amounts to is that if you were to open your eyes, you couldn't make sense of anything without contrast. Vision has no value or meaning without contrast, and I think that might be why we have a leading and a dominant and a less dominant eye. Is that it has to do with deeper balances in our body, not the least of which masculine and feminine, in that. The left side of our body, the left hemisphere of our body corresponds with the right hemisphere of our mind, the actual right brain, the second brain, and then the right the right hemisphere of the body corresponds with the left brain, also the second brain. And I was saying we have two of these structures according to Arthur Avalon, including two brains, and then these different brains. And I would go so far as to say maybe our vision is similar, where one of the two eyes corresponds with a different hemisphere of the brain, and then so this gives perception and gifts visually and personally, having that dynamism, that range, and that dual nature, as many things in reality are also dual and contrasting like that, like night and day, hot and cold, east and west, up and down, so forth. But I would almost go so far as to say that maybe each of our eyes has a personality, because the two different brains are recognized through research to have different characteristics, propensities, and strengths. Where I think the left brain corresponds to logic, and the left brain corresponds to logic, and the right brain corresponds to artistry. And it's interesting that I have a brother who is left-handed. I think some of his left-handedness might actually stem from my influence as a sibling, as outlandish as that would sound, because when I was very young, around the time he was just learning to walk, I had a friend who was left-handed and gifted, my best friend, my only real friend from childhood and really life. And he was left-handed, and I was daunted, amazed by him being left-handed as a child. I was really almost preoccupied with his left-handedness and left-handedness in general as a child. And when my brother was first learning to walk, I was somewhat instigating him and encouraging him to use his left hand more and more as he was a child. I think I might have actually been somewhat overbearing in that, because I was about 6 years his senior, and that's quite a significant challenge. Gap. That's quite a significant advantage as children go. But I was I was overbearing and encouraging him to use his left hand when it wasn't clear which hand which was going to be his strong hand, and then he later developed into being full blown left handed and very artistic. And then when I was in college, around that time I had friends on campus who were involved in ROTC, and some of them were they were attempting to recruit me into like some type of military participation as a college student. And they had actually, I had been a little bit overweight when I came into college, and even though I had been an athlete at different times, and they actually turned me into a formidable and avid runner within 1 year, where I actually appreciated and enjoyed running and became strong as a runner without their support or influence on my own, having been exposed to these ROTC people. But some people in life actually take interest in you you don't actually understand why they're interested in you, but they have perceived something in you similar to like a wolf prospecting you. They might have even heard of your reputation and sought you out, and you don't understand the premise of them being there, but they're actually imparting in a gift that they have for you. So that can be significant with people showing up for us, just like a wolf or dangerous circumstance showing up for us, that I want to point out. But by me spending time around these ROTC people, I thought that I always had an interest in training, and I was interested in military lifestyles, more so for the discipline and the training and the ability to defend a self, more than the actual themes of nationalism, patriotism, or national interest. But I spent time around them, and because I thought that I could potentially at one point maybe be around military, I thought it would be advantageous to start developing my left hand. I had a friend growing up, the friend I referenced, whose sister influenced me, and he had a yet older brother who took an interest in me as a basketball player, and he told me at a young age that he encourages me to start using my left hand more and more for like eating and dressing myself and stuff like that. And I started using my left hand in elementary, and it helped me win acceptance onto different basketball squads, from traveling squads to middle school to high school. Having the ability to actually do a layup smoothly with my left hand, that helped me. That in itself can help a person get onto a sport team, because that distinguishes. It's not only our gifts and strengths that win us acceptance and success. Sometimes it's our distinctions and what makes us different from people who are otherwise similar or equally endowed or trained. And so in a basketball sense, where you have a lot of different kids that are all influenced by basketball and trying out, the one who can actually use their left hand might be the one who can win onto a team. So I had ran with that a little bit when I was young, but then when I was older, in like my mid-20s in college, I started using my left hand. One time I decided to button my shirt with my left hand. That was the first thing I did, and that was very difficult at that point. And then I did not stop that, and I to this very day, and that's been about like maybe 12 years now. And then I even had like roles of like working at a pizza shop where we were having a lot of pressure, and like even when I would have a high-ranking management observing us as we're getting slammed, is what they call it, where you're getting more volume than you can really handle, I would still use my left hand in that situation, like to sauce pizzas, so that I actually got a commendation from a regional manager who was visiting behind my back to a store manager, while I had been saucing a pizza with my left hand under pressure. Well, actually, there wasn't pressure that morning. That was a morning. There wasn't pressure at that time. But I had developed the skill under pressure so that it could serve me if I ever had to use it under pressure, and using my left hand more and more. And I also had come across a video of a craftsman describing himself as an artist at that time. And that was the first time I heard that word artist, and how cool that word sounded when it was real. And so all I meant to say is that by me using my left hand over 12 years, I actually did become somewhat more of an artistic person, at least how I felt about things in an experienced life. But I think that I've actually gotten to the point of a little bit of artistry, like with my music and my curation of style and appearance. and it may have to do with embracing left-handedness and accessing that other hemisphere of the mind that may be potent but yet dormant if we're not engaging it and finding different ways to engage it. So engaging your mind in different ways, whether that be a puzzle or learning another language, that can afford you gifts, benefits, and experiences that you might not be able to realize or come by otherwise or directly as inspiration. But all I wanted to say is that each of our eyes potentially has a character and personality of its own that is unique. Where I would say, if I had to guess, that the left eye is more sensitive and feeling and of the soul, and then the right eye is more dominant and active, maybe like with things like calculating or aiming. And you can kind of see that if you look at a person. But often, I would say that it's they say like look someone in the eye. I think it's very rare that you can actually take someone in and look at both of their eyes at the same time. Usually, if you look at a person in the eye, there's something lopsided about that interaction as you're looking at another person directly, where you're both looking at each other in the eye and there's some respect there, but there's also a little bit of dissonance, which is like where a person's not being honest with themselves, or there's something in the mind that hasn't been all the way worked out, where when we're showing respect to each other and we're looking at each other in the eye, not the eyes, but the eye, there's a little bit of dissonance there and lopsidedness, where we're not really fully feeling like we're taking that entire person in, even though we're looking them in the eye. But there are experiences in time where you actually experience a whole person. Like you're in a circumstance where you are experiencing someone, and at that moment you actually do see both of their eyes, and but you also so what I'm saying is, you can't see both of a person's eyes at once without actually seeing a whole person. So you're seeing their emotions, their mind, the whole person at that moment. That happened to me one time when I had responded to an altar call at church, and then and it had to do with these different painful experiences I'm talking about as my background. And then when I accepted redemption and mercy from God or higher power, I walked out of the sanctuary, and I was met by a woman who was prominent in our community as a youth outreach leader. She would have like dance troupes, but she was more interested in engaging very at-risk youth. And sometimes we actually don't recognize who the youth or people in general who are most at risk are. They wouldn't seem like it on the surface. I don't think I seemed like as much at risk as I was. But people like her can recognize it, and she recognized that in me. And she's the only person who ever commended spiritual gifts in me. She had one time I fell asleep to a rap song, and it's actually a song of a artist who had a little bit more stronger positive messages overall. But I think that artist also had like a background around difficult stuff, and I fell asleep listening to that, and I had a horrible dream, and almost like a warning in that, falling asleep listening to that music that was very frightening to me. And I went to a youth thing where they were doing like games for youth, for inner city youth on weeknights that didn't have anything better to do, but then they would turn it around into a like praying together and giving encouragement. And that might have changed my life, that group, and also her there commending spiritual gifts in me when I related that dream that I had to her. And then, but she passed away young, not too long after that. But before that happened, I had responded to an altar call at church, and when I left the sanctuary, I encountered her, and I actually saw her as a whole being in that moment, and how beautiful and loving she was, and it was like a green grass and a sunny day, and it actually did feel like almost like being born again, like seeing reality for the first time, and then having a mother, no less, a beautiful person, a beautiful woman, to be the first thing you lay your eyes on as you are born or reborn, kind of like a young tenderling laying eyes upon and bonding with the first figure that it sees. And for me, I was fortunate that it was this beautiful person who actually believed in me. That was the first thing I saw. And that's one of the only times I've actually seen both eyes of someone and taken a whole person in at once. But what I want to say is that the last thing I was going to leave with this is that this is a technique that I used once. If you're talking to a person, this is really kind of subtle, and it might even sound ridiculous. But as you're looking at a person, if you can look away from them a little bit, and as though you're looking straight at a person, but you're looking at them as though you were looking at them out of the side of your eye. So you're seeing them, and you're almost seeing past their face, because a lot of like, well, first of all, none of us have actually seen our face before. We've seen our reflection, we've seen pictures, we've seen maybe like a smart device, but we've never actually looked at ourselves because we can't. And that's really deeper than you might think, because sometimes you can't find something that's really close to you. Like sometimes the hardest thing to find is like your keys when they're actually in your hand. And the only two things that we can safely say we have never or may never actually look at directly is outside of exceptional circumstances would be ourself and what we know of as a higher power or Lord, or like I've said, other solemn names in this video, in the other video with this, is that that great awesome person that may be responsible for inciting our reality and existence. That's the one thing we can safely say, or that we can credibly say we have not looked at or may not have looked at directly before, but yet we ourselves are equally something that we haven't looked at before. So that's interesting right there. And I think that maybe the only time that we ever actually get to see ourselves directly, or what we would know of as a greater being directly, is when we can look at one another as though we were actually the same person all along. That's the only time we might actually get to look at one another or a higher power. And I offer that with esteem and respect. And insight like that and comments like that are what helped got me excommunicated. For anyone who's interested in why, in that video where I mentioned that I had been outed and excommunicated in front of a church body on a Sunday morning. And it was after comments and insights that I was attempting like that. But all I meant to say is that we haven't seen our face directly before, and also people we're dealing with haven't seen their face directly before, yet we have a sensation of what our face may look like, and we can play with that and maybe even be skillful with that, and so can people that we're dealing with, but yet they haven't actually seen their actual face before. But if you're engaging with someone, and then you're looking at them directly, but almost as out of the corner of your eye, and like leaning into your left eye a little bit, so you're kind of like you're using your peripheral vision to look at someone directly. If you can imagine that, it's actually painful, and I don't think it's healthy for your visual apparatus, but it can be done. And if you do that like that, and you appreciate this person you're dealing with as though you're looking at the real them, past the falseness of their face to their real face that they can't see actually, and you actually can't quite see. But by you looking at them with your peripheral vision, you can see more directly of that person and how they're using their face to manipulate you and deceive you, by looking past, because as they're engaging with you, you can see their face moving with your peripheral vision, but you actually can't make out, and you don't correspond to the gestures that they're giving you with their facial expressions. But you can see the work they're doing with their expressions. But then you can also see a little bit deeper essence of them that is behind that. I think the word personality is related to persona, and like these false faces from the theater. So you're seeing past their persona into what they're really saying to you, what they're really being to you. You're seeing that with your peripheral vision, and it's almost like returning the look of a wolf. You're looking at a wolf the same way a wolf would look at you. And I once did that with a person who was effectively a wolf in my life, and they were quite frustrated and incensed when I did that. Even though they had a visual deprivation themselves, that caused them to see things differently, they could still see I was looking at them like that, and it incensed them. So sometimes, if you really want to stir the snakes from the grass, you have to use their very tricks on them. That's one thing that a dishonest person cannot stand, is to have their very method and mode of dishonesty, or maybe just cunning, return to them. So if you can, and I don't recommend doing this a lot, because I don't think it's healthy for your eyes. We really shouldn't play with our eyes a lot. When more of when we're experiencing things perceptually and especially visually, the work is really being done by our subconscious mind. When we're and it feels like we're consciously looking at something, but the dilations of the pupil, the work of the eye and the mind that's taking in this, it's happening subconsciously. And so when we consciously affect it, it's interfering with that process, and we can train ourselves up to things, and we can also detrain ourselves out of things. And so it's not good to play with your eyes and detrain the actual mechanism of how you're subconsciously visualizing things. But all I meant to say is that it can be done, that you can look at a person the same way that a wolf would look at someone, which is where they're perceiving you, but they're not actually directly, they're not completely betraying how directly they're looking at you. And they're kind of like, they're aware of you, but they're perceiving you on a deep level, but they're not giving you the impression of how much attention they're actually paying you. And I'm saying it can be done back to them, both like the actual people who are wolves in our lives, whether they mean to be or not. We can return their gaze and their tactics, and this is one of them. And it has to do with the fact that we have there are more nuances and properties of our visual apparatus in us as humans that can allow us to engage with people. So these are some of my experiences of insight into understanding very maybe dangerous people, actors, and their behaviors and mannerisms, and the things that they do that tip us off, that we can respond to, and at least evade them, if not get back over on them as they're getting over on us, whether they directly meant to or not. So I hope this can be helpful, and I encourage everyone to do what's best for you. So I end a lot of these videos with like on a positive note, but I've got like some very like sketchy figures on here, and I think they would do what's best for them, and maybe we're all better at the end if we do that. Peace.